Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's been a while since I posted a video here on YouTube, and for the past few months I've been working hard on my latest sewing pattern, the Marzipan Maker's Coat. The pattern was released a few weeks ago and I did film some bits and pieces of the process of making it, so in this video I wanted to share some of the behind the scenes of making this pattern all the way from coming up with a design to getting it ready for release. So I hope that you enjoy this video, and thanks for watching. So I had actually had an idea for this pattern ever since I started on my pattern making journey, but I didn't really get to working on it seriously until the spring of this year. And I was really inspired by some images I'd found on Pinterest of these beautiful sort of like vintage style painter's coats. It just felt like such a timeless and classic piece that would work well in any wardrobe. I saved some of my favorite inspiration images onto a mood board in Canva and also drew my design with some notes and explored a few ideas before landing on the final design. Once I had decided on my design and all of the elements I wanted to include, I got to work drafting up my first version of the pattern. For the base block, I used the basic overgarment block from Metric Pattern Cutting for Women's Wear by Winifred Aldrich, which I'd say is a pretty good resource, although it's not perfect. So that was my starting point, and then from there I went on to change the pattern to a raglan sleeve and add things like the fold over button band and the collar. So this version that you're seeing now is actually my very first toile of the pattern, and I decided based on the fit of this one that I wanted to add some more ease into the sleeve and drop the underarm a little for a nice and comfy oversized fit. And I really wanted the coat to be able to be layered over like a really thick sweater. Basically, I tested to make sure that it would fit over my Baba sweater, which is probably the chunkiest knit that I own. So I was a lot happier with the fit of this version, which as you can see was version 3 of the pattern draft, and I always find it really helpful to mark the versions on my toiles to keep track of them and be able to match them back to the digital files later. And these were just very like rough toiles with no hems or facings or anything like that. So after incorporating some of those final changes and adjustments into the pattern, I made one final toile with all of the facings and everything to make sure that it was all right before I went ahead and started cutting into actual fabric. So here I was working on adding in all of my seam allowances and truing everything so that it all lines up perfectly when it's sewn. And watching this footage back, I feel like I really need to fix my posture when working at the computer, but anyway, a lot of the time when I'm drafting is spent doing work on the computer, which I actually really enjoy. So I was just working on finalizing all of those little details and also making sure to keep notes of everything that I've done or things I needed to change right within my document so that everything is in one place, which just helps to keep me organized. For my first real version of the coat, I used this really gorgeous cotton lyocell twill from Blackbird Fabrics, which is just such a perfect fit for this pattern. Also, my projector has been such a huge game changer when it comes to pattern making because it's just so much easier to make changes and adjust things and not have to print and assemble pages upon pages of a pattern anymore. If you want to see more about my projector sewing setup, I do have a video on that, so I'll link it somewhere on the screen here. But yeah, this was just a total lifesaver, and honestly, I don't think I could go back to using printed patterns again, especially when it comes to pattern making, where it's just such an iterative process and you're having to print and reprint over and over again. Along the way, I also made sure to take lots of photos of the construction process because this makes it a lot easier to create the illustrations for my instructions later on. Basically what I do is import the photos onto my computer and then use them as a reference or even just trace over them to create my illustrations, and it just makes it a lot easier and more accurate, I think, than trying to draw it from memory, at least for me. So the whole idea behind this pattern is that I wanted it to be something that creative people could wear when they're doing whatever it is that they do, whether that's sewing, painting, gardening, or any other kind of hobby or interest. I come from a creative family, so my dad and my sister are both artists, and my mom is a crafter, a knitter, and a baker. But at the same time, I don't think it's really that unusual or special to call yourself a creative person. I think humans are innately creative, even in ways that might not be seen as creative in a more traditional sense, like something like software development. So this coat is really for anyone and everyone. The name Marzipan is a nod to my Danish heritage and to my family who have always supported me in my creative pursuits. So this was how my first real version of the coat turned out, and I was honestly just so proud of it, and it was exactly how I imagined it. It has really nice big patch pockets that would hold any sort of, like tools of the trade that someone might need. I also wanted to make it unlined to keep it really simple and easy to layer or wear on its own. And I really wanted it to have raglan sleeves because they're not as common in chore coat patterns, but they're so comfortable and also just really satisfying to sew. And I didn't make too many changes to the pattern after this version. I think there were just a couple of small things like adjusting the pocket placements and maybe increasing the width of the collar. But since I was pretty happy with this version, it was on to turning it into an actual sewing pattern product, which means grading out the pattern across my size range. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm just fine, thanks.
Throughout this process, I had a couple of check-ins with my mentor, Victoria, who runs the Confident Patternmaking and Confident Grading programs. And this is actually how I learned pattern making. So I don't have a formal education in it, and I didn't go to fashion school or anything, but I do think Victoria's courses taught me everything that I needed to know, and more importantly, she also teaches size-inclusive grading, which, as far as I know, isn't really part of the curriculum of a lot of actual fashion design programs. So on this call, I was just going over my grade plan with her and getting her thoughts on how my actual graded pattern looked. Victoria just has such a wealth of information and knowledge about pattern making, and I really value her perspective and support throughout the process. And honestly, just being a one-woman business and working alone gets really lonely a lot of the time. I really miss having colleagues to share things with and bounce ideas off of. So being able to connect with Victoria sort of fills that void and really makes the process so much more enjoyable for me. So after grading out my pattern across my size range, I started working on testing another size. And for this purpose, I actually made another bootstrap dress form, which I've made a video of the one that I made for myself. So I'll link that somewhere here for you. But the second one that I made fits the measurement of another size on my size chart. So here I'm just making the toile of that size to then test it on my dress form. And at the same time, I was also testing out a software called Clo 3D, which you might have heard of. It was my first time using it, and it does seem like there's a pretty steep learning curve, to be honest. But once I had sort of figured out the basics, I found it to be a really useful and just really cool and fun tool to play around with. So I also use that to test my pattern on some 3D avatars of different sizes. And unfortunately, I don't have any footage of that. I forgot to film it. But yeah, it was also just really helpful in pre-testing the fit of the pattern across my size range. Then after this, I also work with a fit tester on all my patterns, who again is a different size on my size chart than me. And we went through 2 rounds of fitting the garment to make sure that it worked well for her. So I do all of these steps before sending the pattern out to my broader testing group to try and make sure that the pattern is in the best shape possible for testing and to minimize errors in the fit and construction. The final step to get my pattern ready was to do all of the instructions and illustrations, which I have to say is probably my favorite part of pattern making. Something about it to me is just so satisfying. I get to be creative, but I also have to make sure everything is clear and concise. And just something about having to like compile and organize all of that information and make it look nice and the layout and everything just really makes my Virgo heart sing. It was also just the perfect sort of like moody spring weather outside while I was working on this, so that made it extra cozy and satisfying. And this is typically a pretty long process that involves a lot of work, although I guess it depends on the complexity of the pattern. But I really like to take my time with it and make sure that everything's exactly how I want it. So while I was working on this stage, I was actually doing some pretty long days at the computer just because I enjoyed it so much, and I would just like keep telling myself just one more step or just one more illustration. So yeah, that was just a really fun part for me, and I hope that that comes across when people look at my instructions. After that, all that there was really left to do was send my pattern out to my testers, and I had such a wonderful group of testers for this one who provided me with so much feedback and just really helped make this pattern the best that it could be. So I'm just so grateful to them and just like the sewing community in general. I honestly feel like it's one of the best little corners of the internet. And while my testers were making their versions, I was using that time to sew up some more samples and create all of like the marketing materials for the product listing, so like taking photos and writing the descriptions. So here are a few of the different versions that I made. The pattern comes in 3 lengths, and the first version that I made was the long one. So I made a mid-length and then a cropped version as well to show those different views and also show off how the pattern works with different types of fabrics. So I hope that you enjoyed watching this video and seeing some of the behind the scenes. If you're an aspiring pattern maker, maybe you picked up some tips or got some encouragement to give it a try. Or maybe you're an experienced pattern designer and have some tips to share with me in the comments, which I would be so grateful for. And if you're a sewer, maybe this will inspire you to make the Marzipan coat or any other pattern that you've had your eye on lately. And even if you're not a pattern maker or a sewer, I hope that this video inspires you to do something creative today, whatever that may be. So thank you so much for watching, and I will leave you with some photos of the coat as worn by my beautiful testers.